Part 1. Glenn Miller. Glenn Miller was not just a musician. He was a sound that defined an entire nation during its most fragile moment. In the early 1940s, when uncertainty ruled daily life, his music filled living rooms, military camps, and radios across the country. His orchestra gave rhythm to hope. Songs like In the Mood and Moonlight Serenade were not entertainment alone. They were emotional anchors. They reminded people of home, of love, of normal life waiting on the other side of war. At the height of his fame, Glenn Miller made a decision that stunned the industry. He stepped away from fortune and global recognition. He chose military service. While others entertained from a distance, he enlisted to bring music directly to the soldiers. He believed morale mattered as much as weapons. His role was not symbolic. He worked relentlessly, reorganizing military bands, arranging performances, and traveling constantly to reach troops stationed far from home. By late 1944, Miller had become a fixture of wartime culture in Europe. His presence carried meaning. He was proof that the country had not forgotten its sons fighting overseas. A Christmas concert was being prepared in newly liberated Paris. Miller was scheduled to arrive ahead of time to coordinate rehearsals and broadcasts. The plan was simple. The conditions were not. The weather over England was unstable. Dense fog blanketed airfields. Freezing air clung to metal surfaces. Flights were being delayed or cancelled. Pilots advised waiting. Others chose to stay grounded. Miller did not want to disappoint the soldiers who were expecting him. He boarded a small aircraft, a single-engine plane not designed for extreme weather. There were no safety redundancies. No escorts. No margin for error. Before takeoff, he made a remark about parachutes. It sounded like humor. In hindsight, it felt like a farewell disguised as a joke. The plane lifted into a sky that offered no visibility. Within minutes, it vanished into gray silence. No radio call followed. No emergency signal. No witnesses saw an impact. The aircraft did not reach France. It did not return to England. It simply disappeared. Search efforts followed standard wartime protocol. Aircraft went missing often. Resources were stretched thin. The channel was unforgiving. No wreckage surfaced. No oil slick appeared. No bodies washed ashore. The absence of evidence became the defining feature of the case. Silence replaced certainty. The official explanation pointed to mechanical failure. Cold air could have frozen the carburetor, cutting fuel to the engine. The plane may have lost power and descended rapidly into the sea. This theory was logical. It required no additional variables. It also offered no closure. Another explanation emerged years later. Allied bombers returning from missions sometimes released and used explosives over the channel to reduce landing risk. Records confirmed such activity occurred that same afternoon. Some historians believe a bomb may have fallen into the path of Miller's plane. A tragic accident. Friendly fire without witnesses. A fatal coincidence erased by wartime chaos. There were also suggestions of navigational error or unreported crashes along the coast. None were proven. Each theory existed alongside the others, unable to dominate. The truth remained unreachable, buried beneath water, fog, and time. The military delayed announcing his disappearance. The news broke just before Christmas. Radios that once played his music now delivered the message that he was gone. For millions, the loss felt personal. The men who had provided comfort during fear had vanished without a trace. There was no grave. No ceremony. No final performance. Only records spinning while the creator was nowhere to be found. Psychologically, his disappearance carried unique weight. Glenn Miller went to serve the soldiers and became one of them. Not a general. Not a hero marked by medals. A missing man listed among thousands. His fame offered no protection from war's indifference. In death, or disappearance, he was equal to every unnamed casualty swallowed by circumstance. His music continued to circulate. The contrast was unsettling. A living sound attached to an absent body. Listeners knew the voice of his orchestra would never guide them again. Every broadcast became a reminder of unresolved loss. Decades passed. Investigations reopened. Documents were reviewed. Veterans shared memories. Nothing changed the outcome. No physical evidence emerged. The sea kept its secret. Glenn Miller became a symbol not only of wartime music, but of wartime disappearance. A reminder that history does not always leave answers behind. The emotional core of this story is not mystery alone. It is sacrifice without resolution. A man who gave everything he had, including his life or at least his presence, without ever being acknowledged by certainty. War takes people in many ways. Sometimes it does not even return a body. This disappearance forces a difficult reflection. How many names vanished the same way, without fame, without songs to remember them? Glenn Miller had music to carry his memory. Others had only silence. Some believe the truth still lies undiscovered beneath the channel. Others accept that no final explanation will ever come. The fog that day did not lift. It simply moved forward through history. What matters now is not solving the case, but understanding what it represents. Art cannot shield its creator. Service does not guarantee survival. And even legends can be erased in an instant, leaving only echoes behind. As you reflect on this story, consider which explanation feels closest to the truth and why that version stays with you. Stay with us, because the next chapter shifts from wartime skies to a troubled mind, where disappearance may not have been an accident at all. Part 2, Richie Edwards. Richie Edwards was never just a guitarist standing in the background. He was the mind that shaped the voice of his band. The ideas. The language. The sharp edge that made the music feel dangerous and intelligent at the same time. While others focused on performance, Richie focused on meaning. His lyrics carried politics, philosophy, and pain. Many listeners felt he was speaking directly to their private thoughts. Behind the public image lived a man under constant pressure. He struggled with depression for years. He spoke openly about feeling disconnected from his own body and identity. He treated fame like a trap rather than a reward. Interviews revealed an obsession with authenticity and disappearance. He admired writers and artists who erased themselves from the world. In his notebooks, themes of vanishing and refusal appeared again and again. His body became a battlefield. Extreme weight loss. Exhaustion. Long silences. Moments of shocking behavior that were framed as art but hinted at deeper distress. He did not hide his pain. He turned it into a statement. For many fans, that honesty created loyalty. For those close to him, it created fear. The day he vanished followed no dramatic build-up. He checked out of a hotel in London early in the morning. His bandmates expected him at the airport later that day. A major tour was scheduled. The future of the group depended on it. Richie never arrived. Instead, he drove away alone. Hour by hour, the timeline formed a picture of intention mixed with confusion. He returned to his apartment in Wales. He left behind his passport. His bank cards. His medication. These were not items someone planning a new life would usually abandon. They were also not items someone simply forgetting would ignore. For days, he existed without confirmation. Sightings were reported but never proven. A taxi driver claimed to have driven him through remote valleys. A bus station worker thought they recognized his face. Nothing solid emerged. Then the car appeared. The vehicle was found near a large bridge connecting Wales and England. The location carried symbolic weight. The bridge had a reputation tied to despair and endings. Many immediately assumed this was the answer. The story seemed ready to close itself. But the details resisted simplicity. The battery was dead. The interior showed signs of occupation. Food wrappers. Personal items rearranged. Evidence suggested he had been living inside the car for days after disappearing. He had not arrived and immediately vanished. He waited. He paused. He existed in between. That pause changed everything. It opened the door to another interpretation. This was not only a place of ending. It was also a place of decision. A threshold. The bridge became a symbol rather than a conclusion. Two theories began to dominate. One held that he went to the bridge to end his life, driven by years of internal struggle. The other argued that the bridge was a deliberate misdirection. A final image planted to allow escape. Supporters of this idea pointed to his intelligence, his fascination with disappearing artists, and his rejection of fame. There was no physical proof to settle either view. No body was recovered. No definitive evidence surfaced. Official investigations eventually reached a legal conclusion years later, but emotional certainty never followed. The impact on the band was profound. Performances continued with an empty space on stage. A microphone left unused. Royalties were set aside in case he returned. This was not denial. It was respect mixed with hope. They refused to rewrite the story without him. His family lived inside the uncertainty. A disappearance without confirmation creates a unique kind of grief. There is no ending. Only waiting. Every reported sighting becomes a spark. Every year that passes becomes heavier. Fans split into quiet camps. Some accepted that he was gone. Others believed he was still alive, living under another name, protected by anonymity at last. Online forums turned into archives of clues and theories. Lyrics were reread like coded messages. Every phrase was examined for intent. Richie Edwards became more than a missing person. He became a question. Can someone truly walk away from who they are? Is disappearance a form of freedom or a final expression of pain? Did he lose control, or did he claim it for the first time? What makes this case endure is not the mystery alone. It is the alignment between his inner world and his final act. His art warned of this possibility long before it happened. Whether it was prophecy or coincidence remains unresolved. There is no closure here. Only suspension. A man caught between two narratives. One of collapse. One of escape. Both carry truth. Neither can be proven. As you consider this story, notice which explanation feels more human to you and what that choice reveals about how you understand suffering and freedom. Do not go anywhere, because the next chapter follows an artist whose disappearance seems to mirror the lyrics he wrote long before the road finally swallowed him. Part 3, Jim Sullivan. Jim Sullivan lived on the edge of recognition. He was admired by musicians, actors, and producers, yet success never fully arrived. In Los Angeles he was known as a cult artist, the kind of performer everyone respected but few truly supported. He had presence. Tall. Charismatic. A voice that sounded worn before its time. He played clubs, private gatherings, and industry parties, always close to a breakthrough that never came. His music carried a quiet heaviness. It was reflective, unsettling, and deeply personal. In the late 1960s he recorded an album titled UFO. At the time it felt abstract. Psychedelic folk with strange imagery. Lyrics about leaving family behind. Driving into the desert. Lights in the sky. A sense of being taken away. The album failed commercially and faded into obscurity. Years later, it would feel like a map. By the mid-1970s, frustration had settled in. The Los Angeles dream had not delivered what he hoped for. He felt trapped between talent and invisibility. Friends described exhaustion. A man worn down by years of almost. He decided to leave the city. Not permanently, he said. Just long enough to reset. He packed his belongings into his car. Clothes. Records. Personal items. Most importantly, his 12-string guitar. That guitar was his identity. He told his wife and child he was heading east. Nashville was the destination in his mind. A place where songwriting still mattered. He promised to send for them once he found stability. It sounded hopeful. It also sounded like someone trying to convince himself. The road stretched endlessly. Heat. Silence. Long hours alone with his thoughts. Fatigue followed him. Near Santa Rosa in New Mexico, he was stopped by a highway patrol officer for erratic driving. He was not intoxicated. Just tired. The officer advised him to rest. Jim checked into a small motel. Witnesses later said he seemed unsettled. He bought alcohol at a nearby store. He wandered. He did not sleep. The next morning, he was gone. Days later, his car was found miles away on a remote ranch. It was unlocked. Inside were his clothes, his wallet, his records, and his guitar. That detail froze the investigation. Musicians do not abandon their instruments lightly. Especially not one so personal. Especially not in the middle of nowhere. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood. No damaged property. The desert was vast. Searches were organized. Volunteers walked the land. Aircraft scanned from above. Nothing appeared. No footprints. No remains. The ground offered no answers. Speculation followed quickly. One theory suggested he walked into the desert, overwhelmed by despair. Exposure would have claimed him quietly. The land has erased many before. Another theory pointed to foul play. The ranch where the car was found had a reputation. Rumors of criminal activity circulated. Some believed Jim crossed paths with the wrong people. A confrontation. A disappearance made permanent. No evidence confirmed this. Others believed he chose to vanish. A deliberate act. A rejection of failure. Supporters of this idea returned again and again to the album UFO. The lyrics were unsettlingly specific. Driving into the desert. Looking at the sky. Leaving everything behind. Being taken away. Fans wondered whether he had been preparing for this moment unconsciously for years. The alignment between art and reality was impossible to ignore. Lines once dismissed as metaphor now sounded literal. The coincidence felt too precise. Too complete. Yet coincidence does happen. Human minds search for patterns when faced with absence. What complicated the case further was what did not happen. There were no confirmed sightings after the car was found. No financial activity. No letters. No contact. If he intended to start over, he did so perfectly. If he intended to disappear completely, he succeeded. Years passed. His wife waited. His child grew up without answers. The music industry moved on. Then something strange happened. Decades later, his album was rediscovered. Listeners found it online. Critics praised its depth. Jim Sullivan was finally recognized as a unique voice. The success he wanted arrived after he was gone. That posthumous recognition added another layer of tragedy. The man who could not be heard in life became admired in absence. Every lyric gained weight. Every song felt like a message sent forward in time. There is a temptation to romanticize his disappearance. To frame it as destiny. To believe he became part of the desert or something beyond it. But reality may be simpler and harsher. A tired man. A lonely road. A moment of decision with no witnesses. Still, the question remains. Did Jim Sullivan write his own ending, or did fate read his songs and follow their instructions? Was the album a warning, or just a mirror reflecting what was already inside him? The desert does not explain itself. It absorbs stories and keeps them. What is left behind is silence filled with interpretation. As this story settles, ask yourself whether the connection between his music and his disappearance feels accidental or inevitable. Stay close, because the next chapter moves from empty highways to open water, where a single wave erased a life in seconds. Part 4, Scott Smith. Scott Smith had already lived the life most musicians chase. World tours. Hit songs. Crowds singing every word back at the stage. By the time the noise faded, he did not cling to it. He stepped away quietly. He chose calm over spotlight. He chose space over schedules. Fame did not define him anymore. Those who knew him described a man at ease with himself. He loved the ocean. He trusted it. Sailing was not a hobby. It was a refuge. On the water, there were no expectations. No interviews. No deadlines. Just wind, movement, and balance. His sailboat became a private world where the past could not follow. The boat was well maintained. Solid. Designed for long trips. Scott was experienced. He respected the sea but was not afraid of it. He had sailed these waters before. The plan was simple. A coastal journey. Friends on board. Time away from land. Nothing reckless. Nothing rushed. The weather that day was not ideal, but it was not alarming. Swells were moderate. The sky was heavy but familiar. Sailors accept discomfort as part of the deal. The ocean does not need to be calm to be navigable. Scott believed this. Many did. They were not far from shore. The coastline was visible. The boat moved steadily. Scott was on deck, adjusting lines, steering, doing what he had done countless times. The others were below or sheltered. Then the sea changed without warning. There was no build-up. No signal. A wall of water rose where there should have been none. A rogue wave. Rare. Unpredictable. Formed by the collision of currents and energy. It does not announce itself. It arrives fully formed. The wave struck the boat with immense force. The deck tilted violently. Objects flew. The vessel did not capsize, but it staggered. Water swept across the surface like a living thing. In that instant, Scott was gone. When the boat steadied, panic replaced shock. His name was called. No answer. The wheel was empty. The rail was wet. There was no sound except wind and water. The realization came quickly and brutally. He had been taken. Immediate action followed. The boat turned back. Ice scanned the surface. Every shadow looked like hope. Every ripple felt like movement. A call for help went out. Authorities responded. The search expanded rapidly. Helicopters arrived. Patrol boats circled. Volunteers joined. The area was covered again and again. Hours passed. Then more hours. The ocean did not return him. Cold water steals strength fast. Currents pull bodies down and away. Visibility disappears. Even the most determined search cannot fight physics forever. The operation continued until exhaustion replaced hope. No trace surfaced. No clothing. No flotation device. Nothing to mark where he went under. The sea erased the moment completely. For those left behind, the shock lingered. The randomness was unbearable. A man could fill arenas and then vanish in seconds. Not because of excess. Not because of chaos. Simply because nature does not care who you are. The ocean does not recognize success. It does not reward experience. It does not pause out of respect. It moves according to forces older than memory. In that truth, Scott Smith became small. Like everyone else who enters it. His disappearance ended more than a life. It closed a chapter for those who shared the stage with him. Music carried on, but something fundamental was missing. The rhythm remained. The presence did not. There was no mystery to solve in the traditional sense. No crime. No conspiracy. Just a reminder of fragility. One moment upright. The next erased. Some stories of disappearance invite imagination. This one resists it. There is no hidden path. No second life. No unanswered clue waiting to be uncovered. Only water and absence. Yet the impact is profound. It forces a confrontation with reality. Control is temporary. Safety is conditional. The line between peace and disaster is thinner than believed. Scott Smith did not seek danger. He sought quiet. The irony is cruel. The place that gave him peace also took him away. The ocean continued moving long after the search ended. Waves replaced waves. The surface forgot what happened beneath it. Humans did not. This story remains unsettling because it could belong to anyone. No warning. No meaning. Just chance meeting force. As you reflect on this moment, consider whether nature feels neutral or merciless, and what that difference says about how we face uncertainty. Stay with us, because the next chapter turns away from open water and toward a woman who chose disappearance as a final form of expression. Part 5, Connie Converse. Connie Converse mattered before anyone knew her name. She wrote songs with a quiet intelligence that did not ask for permission. In a small apartment in New York, she shaped a form that would later be called the modern singer-songwriter style. Intimate language. Plain-spoken melodies. Emotional honesty without performance tricks. She did this years before the culture was ready to hear it. History did not make room for her. The industry she approached could not recognize a woman who refused to soften her voice or simplify her thoughts. Her music was not loud. It did not sell rebellion or glamour. It asked listeners to sit still with feeling. Doors stayed closed. Opportunities stalled. Praise came without support. Over time, disappointment hardened into identity confusion. She tried to adapt. She took office jobs. She moved cities. She folded her music into drawers and filing cabinets. The songs remained, but the life around them shrank. Friends noticed a growing sense of invisibility. Not bitterness. Something quieter. A feeling of being unnecessary. Health struggles deepened that isolation. A serious medical condition required surgery that changed how she experienced her body. She spoke about feeling altered. Reduced. As if something essential had been taken without consent. The physical recovery ended. The emotional one did not. By midlife, she lived far from stages and studios. Her days followed routine. Work. Home. Silence. The distance between who she was and who she had become felt permanent. She did not dramatize this pain. She analyzed it. Thought about it. Wrote through it. Then she began to prepare. She did not announce a decision. She did not make demands. She wrote letters. Calm. Precise. Philosophical. Letters to family and close friends that read like reflections rather than farewells. She asked to be allowed to go. To exist elsewhere, or not exist at all. The tone was gentle. There was no accusation. Only a request for understanding. She packed her belongings carefully. Clothes. Papers. Music manuscripts. Not much else. She left her home, got into her car, and drove away. There was no destination shared. No schedule. No plan that others could follow. That was the last confirmed moment. What followed was absence without evidence. No abandoned vehicle. No discovered remains. No trace on roads or in records. Investigators looked. Family waited. Nothing surfaced. Time passed without interruption or revelation. The official explanation leaned toward despair and a solitary end somewhere quiet. The letters seemed to support that reading. The lack of evidence also allowed another possibility. Reinvention. A changed name. A smaller life chosen deliberately. A disappearance as an act of control rather than defeat. Supporters of this idea point to her intellect. Her discipline. Her capacity for planning. They imagine her choosing obscurity over erasure. Living modestly. Reading. Working anonymously. Free from expectation. Others reject that comfort. They see the letters as a final accounting. A gentle closing of the door. The silence as confirmation. Both interpretations struggle with the same problem. There is no proof. Absence resists certainty. Years later, something changed. Her recordings were discovered. Listeners heard the songs she had written decades earlier. Critics praised their clarity and emotional depth. She was recognized as a pioneer. Articles were written. Albums were released. The world finally caught up. She was not there to see it. That recognition sharpened the tragedy. The culture that once ignored her now celebrated her absence. The success she had wanted arrived without her participation. Applause echoed into a space she no longer occupied. Her story raises uncomfortable questions. Does a person have the right to step out of history? To choose silence when the world refuses to listen? To erase a public self in order to preserve a private one? There is no scandal here. No spectacle. Only intention and uncertainty. A woman who measured her life carefully and then removed herself from the equation. Her disappearance feels different from the others. It does not center on accident or force. It centers on choice. Or the illusion of choice. The line between those two remains unclear. Connie Converse exists now as music and possibility. As songs without a singer. As a question left open by design or by circumstance. As you sit with her story, consider whether disappearance can be an act of dignity, and what that belief asks of those who remain. Stay with us, because the next chapter follows a voice from the counterculture era that faded into the desert heat and never returned. Part 6, Licorice McKechnie. Licorice McKechnie stood on the Woodstock stage as a living symbol of the counterculture dream. Her voice floated through the air with a softness that felt spiritual rather than performative. She was not loud. She did not command. She invited. To many, she represented freedom itself. A woman unbound by rules, singing as if the world could still be gentle. The dream did not last. When the band fractured, the shared identity dissolved with it. The communal life that once held meaning fell apart quietly. There was no dramatic collapse. Just distance. Members moved on. Audiences shifted. The era that celebrated openness hardened into something colder. Licorice stepped away from visibility without ceremony. Life after the spotlight proved unstable. Money was uncertain. Direction was unclear. She drifted between places and people, never settling for long. Her health began to fail. Breathing issues followed her. Fatigue lingered. She searched for answers where many in her generation did, in belief systems promising clarity and healing. Scientology became part of her world for a time. It offered structure. It also deepened isolation. Relationships unraveled. A marriage ended. Connections thinned. The woman once surrounded by music and community found herself increasingly alone. She moved between states. California. Arizona. Wherever the air felt lighter. Wherever the heat seemed to help her lungs. By the late 1980s, her life had become transient. She carried little. She relied on kindness. She trusted movement more than stability. Friends described restlessness. A need to keep going. As if stopping meant facing something she could not name. She told family she was heading into the desert. The heat felt good, she said. The open space felt right. Arizona promised relief and silence. The Superstition Mountains loomed nearby. Beautiful. Dangerous. A landscape known for swallowing those who underestimated it. Then the letters stopped. Calls went unanswered. Licorice McKechnie vanished into the heat. There was no immediate urgency. She was an adult. She traveled often. This was an era before constant tracking. People slipped away easily. By the time concern hardened into alarm, the trail had already cooled. The investigation was minimal. No confirmed last sighting. No financial record to follow. No vehicle definitively linked to her final movements. The desert offered too many paths and erased them quickly. Years passed. She was presumed gone. Another casualty of a harsh landscape and a fragile life. Her voice remained on old recordings, young and hopeful, frozen in time. Then rumors surfaced. Decades later, a message appeared online. A claim that Licorice was alive. Living quietly under another name. Wanting privacy. The post spread quickly. Hope ignited. Fans debated. Was it a hoax? Wishful thinking? Or a rare truth slipping through? No proof followed. No photograph. No confirmation. The mystery deepened rather than resolved. The idea of survival remained possible because nothing had ever closed the door. Her story exposes the shadow beneath the hippie promise. Total freedom without protection can become vulnerability. A life unstructured can slip beyond reach. Idealism does not shield against illness, loneliness, or the indifference of the land. Licorice McKechnie did not chase disappearance for drama. If she chose to vanish, it was quiet. If she was taken by the desert, it was without witnesses. Either way, the world lost track of her without resistance. Her case resists clean conclusions. It balances between tragedy and autonomy. Between loss and escape. The desert does not answer questions. It absorbs them. What remains is a voice captured on vinyl and a question that refuses to fade. How free is free enough? And when does freedom become erasure? As you reflect on her path, consider whether absolute freedom is something to seek or something to survive. Stay close, because the next chapter follows a man whose mind carried both music and science, and whose disappearance left behind a single chilling call. Part 7. Philip Taylor Kramer. Philip Taylor Kramer lived two lives that rarely exist in the same body. On stage, he was a rock musician, part of a band whose sound defined an era of psychedelic excess and volume. Off stage, he was a disciplined thinker, a man drawn to mathematics, physics, and the logic hidden beneath chaos. Music fed his spirit. Science consumed his mind. After years in the music world, he stepped away without bitterness. He returned to school. He studied aerospace engineering. He immersed himself in complex systems and abstract problems. His intelligence was not casual. It was intense. Focused. Those around him described a man who thought faster than conversation could keep up with. He moved into advanced technology. Defense-related work. Data compression. Mathematical modeling. The kind of research that attracts attention and pressure at the same time. He believed he was close to a breakthrough. Something fundamental. A way to understand reality at a deeper level. He spoke about equations that could reshape communication and physics. To him, this was not ambition. It was obsession. The pressure grew quietly. Long hours. Financial strain from startup ventures. The weight of expectation. Friends noticed stress, but also optimism. He spoke about the future as if it were within reach. There were no clear signs of collapse. No warnings that made sense afterward. The day he vanished unfolded with unsettling precision. He drove toward an airport to meet a potential investor. The meeting did not happen. He waited. Time passed. What occurred during that window remains unknown. Then the calls began. He contacted people close to him. His voice sounded controlled. Detached. He spoke in fragments. There was urgency without clarity. One message referenced danger. Another hinted at finality. The most disturbing call came last. A call to emergency services. He identified himself clearly. He stated that he intended to harm himself. The line disconnected before details could be gathered. After that moment, he disappeared. His family rejected the idea that he would willingly end his life. They described a man deeply invested in his work and his loved ones. His father, a respected academic, believed external forces were involved. He suspected surveillance. Interference. The possibility that his son had uncovered something sensitive and paid a price for it. Others believed the explanation was internal. That the weight of brilliance became unbearable. That a mind capable of extraordinary insight can also fracture under its own intensity. The calls were interpreted as signs of psychological crisis rather than threat. Search efforts began immediately. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into years. There were no confirmed sightings. No financial activity. No clear trail. His car was missing. His research materials were gone. It was as if he had stepped out of the world completely. For years passed before chance intervened. Hikers exploring a remote canyon discovered wreckage far below the road. A vehicle. Hidden by distance and vegetation. Inside were human remains. Identification confirmed what many feared. Philip Taylor Kramer had been there all along, unseen, unreachable. The official conclusion pointed toward a tragic decision. The location suggested a deliberate act. The earlier call seemed to support it. Yet questions remained. Why that place? Why the detour? Why were his research notes never recovered? Why did no one find the car sooner? Those unanswered details kept speculation alive. Some believed the conclusion was convenient. Others accepted it as the simplest explanation. The truth settled into ambiguity. What troubled many most was the disappearance of his work. The equations he spoke about were never found. No backups surfaced. No collaborators produced copies. Whatever he believed he had discovered vanished with him. That loss fueled theories. Was it destroyed intentionally? Was it taken? Or did it never exist beyond his mind? Philip Taylor Kramer became a symbol of the thin line between genius and collapse. A man who reached toward understanding and lost himself in the process. His life challenges comforting narratives. Intelligence does not guarantee stability. Insight does not protect against inner storms. His story also exposes how easily brilliance can isolate. When few can follow your thoughts, solitude becomes constant. When expectations rise faster than results, pressure compounds. The mind turns inward. The world grows distant. In the end, he was both musician and scientist. Both creator and question. His disappearance left behind music that still plays and ideas that never reach daylight. As you think about his final days, consider whether his story feels more like a mind overwhelmed from within or a talent crushed by forces outside his control. Remain here, because the next chapter moves from equations and canyons to a young woman born into fame who vanished into a river and left a family divided by hope and grief. Part 8, Eileenia Karesi. Eileenia Karesi was born into a world already watching her. Her parents were music icons, beloved across Europe, their voices woven into decades of romance and nostalgia. From childhood, Eileenia lived under a spotlight she did not choose. Cameras followed family moments. Strangers recognized her name before they knew her personality. Privilege surrounded her, but so did expectation. She grew up intelligent, curious, and restless. Fame felt heavy rather than comforting. She did not want to be an extension of her parents' image. She wanted anonymity. Meaning. A life defined by her own choices rather than inherited applause. Writing attracted her. Travel fascinated her. She searched for places where no one cared who her parents were. That search carried her far from home. She studied abroad. She moved between countries. Eventually, she arrived in New Orleans, a city that attracts people looking for reinvention. Music poured from the streets. History pressed close. The line between beauty and danger blurred easily there. She did not stay in luxury. She chose a cheap hotel in a rough area. It felt authentic. Unfiltered. Friends and family worried. Eileenia insisted she was fine. She believed discomfort was part of freedom. In that environment, she met a man who would later dominate the narrative of her disappearance. A street musician. Older. Charismatic. Self-described as a spiritual guide. He spoke in absolutes. He framed control as enlightenment. Those close to Eileenia believed he exerted psychological influence over her. They feared isolation. Dependency. Manipulation. Her parents sensed danger from afar. Conversations grew tense. They urged her to leave. She resisted. The more pressure she felt from home, the more tightly she clung to her independence. Control and concern became indistinguishable. The night she vanished was unremarkable on the surface. She was seen at the hotel. She left behind her passport. Her clothes. Personal belongings. Items people normally protect. She walked out into the night and did not return. At first, confusion replaced panic. Adults disappear sometimes. Travelers change plans. But hours turned into days. No calls. No messages. Concern hardened into fear. The investigation moved slowly. The men she was with did not report her missing. When questioned, his answers were vague. He attempted to use her travel funds. Authorities detained him briefly. No physical evidence tied him to a crime. He was released. Suspicion lingered. Then a witness came forward. A security guard near the river reported seeing a young woman matching Eileenia's description late at night. She was sitting near the water in a restricted area. When told to leave, she responded calmly. According to the guard, she said she belonged to the water. She then entered the river. The river was strong. Dark. Unforgiving. A passing vessel disrupted the surface. The woman disappeared beneath the current. Search efforts followed. The river gave nothing back. No body was recovered. No confirmation arrived. The story rested on a single account. That absence fractured the family. Her father accepted the explanation. The witness testimony felt sincere to him. He believed his daughter, possibly under emotional strain or influence, had entered the water and been lost. For him, accepting this brought painful closure. Her mother refused it completely. She believed Eileenia was alive. That the river story was mistaken or staged. That her daughter escaped. Changed her identity. Joined a secluded community. Her hope hardened into conviction. Years passed. The disagreement became permanent. Hope and grief pulled the family in opposite directions. Each possibility carried its own form of suffering. Other theories emerged. Abduction. Intentional disappearance. A tragic accident unrelated to the river. Each lacked proof. Each survived because nothing eliminated it. At one point, a serial offender claimed responsibility for a crime involving a woman resembling Eileenia. Investigators examined the claim. Evidence disproved it. Another door closed without answers. Eileenia became frozen in time. Forever young. Forever unresolved. Her face remained in photographs. Her name echoed in interviews and documentaries. She became less a person and more a symbol of uncertainty. Her story highlights a particular danger of inherited fame. The desire to escape can be as powerful as the desire to succeed. Freedom can pull harder than safety. When a person runs from identity, they sometimes outrun protection as well. The river stands at the center of this story. Silent. Indifferent. It does not confirm. It does not deny. It carries all versions equally and responds to none. Whether Eileenia chose disappearance, suffered an accident, or fell victim to another force remains unknown. What is certain is the cost of not knowing. A family divided. A life paused rather than ended. Her disappearance reminds us that freedom without anchors can become isolation, and isolation can erase even the most visible names. As you sit with this story, consider which explanation feels most convincing to you and what it reveals about how you understand choice and vulnerability. Stay with us, because the next chapter moves to the open sea once more, where a pop idol vanished from a ship and left behind only questions drifting on cold water. Part 9, Daniel KBLBCK. Daniel Kubalbach entered public life as a spectacle. Television turned him into a character before he understood who he was. Audiences laughed, judged, adored, and mocked him at the same time. He became famous not for perfection, but for excess. Energy without restraint. Emotion without filter. The camera rewarded that chaos. Fame arrived early and stayed loud. Interviews followed. Appearances multiplied. His image hardened into something fixed, while his inner life kept shifting. The gap between who he was allowed to be and who he felt himself becoming grew wider with time. Behind the bright costumes and exaggerated confidence lived uncertainty. Identity became a daily struggle rather than a private question. He spoke openly about confusion and discomfort in his own skin. Eventually, he began presenting himself differently. A feminine persona emerged. New clothes. A new name. For him, it was not performance. It was survival. Public reaction was brutal and divided. Support mixed with ridicule. Curiosity blended with cruelty. The same platforms that had elevated him amplified every moment of vulnerability. There was no quiet space to explore change. Every step happened under observation. Mental stability became fragile. Friends noticed mood swings. Anxiety. Moments of detachment. Still, he continued forward, believing movement was better than stillness. He boarded a cruise ship bound across the Atlantic seeking distance. A floating city. Anonymous among thousands. For a brief moment, that anonymity felt possible. But isolation followed him on board. Crew members and passengers later described strange behavior. Wandering alone for hours. Talking to himself. Visible distress. Emotional outbursts in his cabin. Staff intervened gently. They moved him closer to monitored areas. Concern existed, but boundaries limited action. At sea, there is nowhere to go. No streets to disappear into. No exits. The ship moves forward regardless of what happens inside it. One early morning, witnesses reported a figure climbing over the railing. The sea below was dark. Cold. Unforgiving. Alarms sounded. The ship slowed. Search procedures activated immediately. The response was large and fast. Rescue teams deployed. Aircraft scanned the surface. Nearby vessels assisted. The water temperature allowed little time. Waves erased evidence quickly. Nothing was found. Hours turned into days. The search expanded, then ended. The ocean kept its silence. Without physical confirmation, the situation entered legal uncertainty. Authorities eventually issued a declaration of death for administrative reasons. Paperwork closed. Emotion did not. Debate followed. Some blamed the cruise line. They argued warning signs were clear and intervention should have been stronger. Others insisted personal autonomy must be respected. That no system can fully prevent someone determined to vanish. The discussion exposed a deeper issue. Mental health at sea. Responsibility without authority. Care without confinement. There were no easy answers. Daniel Kubalbach became another name lost to water, but his case felt different. He was not alone in the traditional sense. Thousands were nearby. Yet isolation had never been stronger. His story forces uncomfortable reflection. What happens when identity exploration unfolds under relentless public pressure? When vulnerability becomes content? When change is treated as entertainment? He was visible everywhere and understood nowhere. The sea did not judge him. It did not misunderstand him. It simply took him out of sight. Today, his memory exists in fragments. Video clips. Headlines. Debates. He is remembered less for music and more for disappearance. Less for voice and more for silence. Legal closure cannot replace human understanding. A body was never recovered. A final moment was never confirmed. Only absence remains. This chapter is not about blame. It is about limits. Of systems. Of care. Of empathy in public life. Daniel Kubalbach stood in front of millions and still felt alone. That contradiction defines his story more than any headline. As you think about his journey, consider what responsibility society carries when someone's struggle unfolds in full view yet remains unheard. Stay with us, because the final chapter leaves the ocean behind and enters a war zone, where a camera replaced a guitar and disappearance became legend. Part 10, Sean Flynn. Sean Flynn was born into privilege that most people only see on screens. His father was a Hollywood legend, a symbol of charm, danger, and effortless power. Sean could have lived safely inside that legacy. Money, comfort, protection, and admiration were all available. He rejected them without hesitation. Safety bored him. Distance from reality felt like a lie. He wanted intensity. He wanted truth that could not be staged. Acting did not interest him. He chose a camera instead of a script. Journalism became his escape from inheritance. War became his addiction. Friends described him as fearless to the point of recklessness. He was drawn to places where history was breaking apart in real time. Conflict zones made him feel awake. He believed that proximity to danger stripped life down to something honest. In chaos, he felt clarity. By the late 1960s, Southeast Asia was pulling journalists toward it like gravity. Vietnam dominated headlines, but Cambodia was slipping into something darker and less understood. Borders blurred. Authority fractured. Armed groups controlled roads and villages. Information was scarce and rumors ruled. Sean Flynn entered this environment willingly. He moved through front lines with confidence that bordered on arrogance. Soldiers respected him. Fellow correspondents worried about him. He laughed off caution. Risk was part of the experience he chased. In Cambodia, he traveled with another journalist, Dana Stone. They shared the same hunger for proximity. Both believed the best story waited just beyond the last checkpoint. Turning back felt like failure. On an April morning, they rented motorcycles. Red. Loud. Impossible to miss. They had heard reports of a checkpoint on a remote highway, controlled by forces hostile to outsiders. Most reporters avoided it. Sean did not. They rode toward it anyway. Witnesses later recalled seeing them disappear down the road, swallowed by heat and dust. That image became the final confirmed sighting. No one saw them return. No photographs were filed. No messages sent. Silence followed immediately. The disappearance sent shock waves through journalism and Hollywood alike. A famous name gone in a place that did not care about fame. Search efforts began, but the region offered little cooperation and less safety. Roads shifted hands daily. Records did not exist. Witnesses feared speaking. Years passed without answers. Stories multiplied. Some claimed Sean was held captive, forced to teach or perform tasks for his captors. Others said he was executed quickly. A few insisted he survived and chose to stay, abandoning identity and family. His mother refused to accept uncertainty. She spent her fortune funding searches, hiring investigators, chasing rumors deep into dangerous territory. She believed proof still existed. That belief sustained her until her death. Decades later, fragments surfaced. Former fighters spoke. Documents were examined. Accounts aligned on a grim possibility. Sean and his companion were likely captured shortly after passing the checkpoint. Held for months. Moved between camps. Treated as enemies rather than observers. The final account described a brutal end in a remote location. No burial. No marker. No recovery. The land kept what it took. No remains were ever conclusively identified. The story closed without physical confirmation, leaving space for myth to grow. Sean Flynn transformed from a person into a symbol. A representation of reckless courage. Of a generation that believed truth demanded proximity regardless of cost. Songs referenced him. Articles romanticized him. His name became shorthand for disappearing into history. That transformation erased complexity. He was no longer a son. No longer a friend. No longer a flawed man chasing sensation. He became an idea. The danger of that shift is subtle. It rewards excess. It frames recklessness as purity. It overlooks consequences paid by families left behind. Sean Flynn did not disappear by accident. He made choices aligned with his values. He believed truth lived where comfort died. He accepted the risk fully. That acceptance does not make the outcome less tragic. His story sits at the intersection of idealism and arrogance. Courage and blindness. Freedom and finality. The road he rode did not promise survival. Only intensity. He chose it anyway. In the end, Sean Flynn found what he sought. A life lived without distance from danger. The cost was everything else. He remains frozen in the image of a man riding into dust, camera ready, convinced that the next mile held meaning worth the risk. As you reflect on his journey, consider whether he crossed the line between courage and self-destruction, and where you believe that line truly exists. Stay with us, because what follows is not another disappearance, but a moment to step back and confront what all these vanished lives reveal about fame, freedom, and the price of going too far.